Right, well what I'm going to do is talk about Brahms' fantasy analysis, well it's my fantasy analysis of Brahms' A major intermezzo opus 118 number 2. I've just created my own set of resources for this. Thank you, Ryan. I've just created my own set of resources for this, which include an annotated study edition with loads of footnotes that alert you to various features of the piece, so that when you're studying this piece you can really get right inside it, because that's the important thing with this music. It's not superficial. There's so much buried inside of the piece, and I hope today that I'm going to be able to share some of those things with you. So the resources include a whole bunch of videos, including a video walkthrough series where I just take section by section and go through, and including the fantasy analysis in much more detail than I'm going to be able to do here. Hello Niels and Paul, nice to meet you, nice to see you. So let me launch straight in with this, but I think I need to just give a little bit of a backstory because, as I say, it's my own personal fantasy analysis. And it has to do with the relationship Brahms had with Clara Schumann, whom he met first in 1853 as a young man. He went to study with Robert Schumann and stayed in the Brahms household, and really was so smitten with Clara that it wasn't funny. He wrote to her a couple of years afterwards and said, "I can do nothing but think of you. What have you done to me? Can't you remove the spell you've cast over me?" The year after that, Robert died. Brahms moved into the household, the Clara Schumann household, with her and her children. He stayed in the room upstairs. Important to mention that. What happened was, after that, they could have got married. They didn't. Who knows why? Maybe it was just the sign of the times that Clara respected the memory of her husband. Johannes perhaps didn't want the commitment, but anyway, they went to Switzerland just after on holiday together, and effectively Brahms said goodbye during that holiday, even though they went on holidays plenty of times afterwards and kissed and hugged. He wrote these for her. In his later years, he was an old man, she was an even older woman. We're talking twilight, we're talking autumnal. You can feel that in the music. You can feel lots of longing, a lot of regret, a lot of love and tenderness for a dear lifelong friend. And with that as background, I'm going to just uncover some of the features of the piece. I think I should probably read this quotation that Brahms wrote to Clara in 1856. "I wish I could write to you as tenderly as I love you and tell you all the good things that I wish you. You are so infinitely dear to me, dearer than I can say." Clara writes, "He came like a true friend to share all my sorrow. He strengthened the heart that threatened to break. He uplifted my mind. He cheered my spirit when and wherever he could. In short, he was my friend in the fullest sense of the word." So we're talking about something mutual here. Hello, Louise. Hello, Janet. Nice to see you. Stick around. I'm going to start now. So we probably all very familiar with this intermezzo. Let me play you the beginning of it. Just have a little look at some of the things that are happening in that first phrase. We've got the obvious melody on the top, which feels to me, "Come to me, come to me." He's opening his arms a little bit. Then he's opening his arms more, but there's a little pain, isn't there, in that minor seventh, that interval that yearns as it rises, almost as though she were unreachable to him. And at the same time we've got that melody going on the top, we've got several things happening underneath. We've got a throbbing, pairs of quavers. Those are eighth notes. Quavers are eighth notes. So here they're marked with slurs. tira, tira. Obviously we don't make a separation after the end of the slur, that would be ludicrous, but what we would want to do would be to play strong, weak, to create that sense of sighing, throbbing, yearning. But one thing I'm most interested in, which I hardly ever hear people do, and that's the underneath line, the alto line. If I just extract that for you, we've got 3 notes that fall wistfully. I don't know what that means to you, what that says to you. It pervades, that idea of 3 notes falling, pervade this whole set of pieces throughout. For me, it's farewell. It's a resignation, it's valedictory, and where do I get that from? Well, there's an obvious place. If I change key somewhat violently and horrifically, Frankie, hello, to the key of E flat major, and just play you the opening 3 notes of Beethoven's Les Adieux Sonata, Opus 81A. Beethoven's written the words Lebe wohl, meaning farewell, over those 3 notes. Now let me come back to my key. So when we hear those 3 notes, do we perhaps get the sense that Brahms is reaching out for Clara, and at the same time realizing perhaps that they have to say goodbye, it's too late, they're old. So I get this wonderful blend really between the 2 ideas, the melodic line that goes up, the line that everybody would sing when they walk out of the concert hall, combined with this alto line, this second violin line, if you will. Now if we look at the harmonies here, I'm going to jump to the end of bar 2 here. Dominant harmony here. Look how rich that is with the 6ths. So it's not all about the top, it's about what goes on underneath as well as what goes on the top. So there's a sense of ardour here, such an old-fashioned word, ardour. Wide eyes, please, please, Clara. And that beautiful G natural in the tenor there, in the viola maybe, pulls it back down, doesn't it? It stops it going in the dominant direction in the circle of fifths. If you think of your circle of fifths, it's already started with chord 4, the subdominant. This plagal feeling, which is a kind of spiritual quality too. Rachel, hello. Sheila, hello. There's a spiritual element to that, and then this G natural, which I think we need to just balance up a little bit, So we feel it pulling down to the F sharp, there, and as if to atone for that, as if to say, actually, no, we are keeping positive here. He goes in the dominant direction by going to what's known in the textbooks as a secondary dominant, but the dominant of the dominant. So you can reach a nice cadence in the key of E major, the dominant key. But what's interesting to me is I don't feel a really strong cadence in the home key, A major, until the end of the first section, to bar 48, which is quite something. So Brahms creates this huge long arch, from the beginning to bar 48. So if we look at what he does thereafter, having modulated or arrived anyway in the key of E major, the dominant key, he comes back, he just gives us a repeat of the opening, pianissimo. So far so good. Now listen to what goes on in the alto. I wouldn't voice it that way, I'm just doing that to show you the chromatic line, this rather desolate, hopeless, pathetic, if you will, falling chromatic line. And look there, whereas before we had a dominant 7th at the end of bar 2, which has a little bit of expectation further to it. Here we've got a diminished 7th, which is crushed, literally squished. And as if those things weren't enough, he gives us another beautiful gift, which is a double appoggiatura from below to the A in the alto, and from above in the tenor to the A, which needs to be listened to. It needs to be heard and created. Don't breeze past that. Neither disturb your forward flow, but it's a delicate question there of just really making sure you have heard that lovely effect there. Now, all is well and good. Dolce. There's our secondary dominant again. And notice at the end of bar 14, how he doesn't do quite what he did at the end of bar 6. Hello Marty, nice to meet you. My absolute favourite piece from South Africa. Nice to meet you. Yes, I can understand why this would be many people's favourite piece. It's absolutely gorgeous. So if you've not played it, hopefully this will inspire you to go and learn it. Let's look at what Brahms does at the end of bar 14. Looks more or less the same, but it isn't. Now here, this B sharp. Do you hear that? How that pulls against the C sharp that we want to hear? Again, more yearning maybe. Now the voice leading here, people miss this all the time. If you look at the top line, Brahms has been very, very careful to write stems. Hello Kate. Hello Elizabeth. Stems going up. Now what's the interval here? That's a ninth, yes? What was it before? Seventh. But the ninth is somehow even more yearning. It's not that you have to make a huge deal of that, but you do have to notice it. Thank you, Marina. Thank you. Let me go on now with the next section that starts at the end of bar 16. You can hear him saying, I love you, can't you? Oh, be careful about how you phrase that, because while the phrase mark does start on the upbeat, Brahms's emphasis is certainly on the second melody note in the right hand. Love. Now he's cranking up the tension here. Do you feel the line? It's pulling up, isn't it, in the alto? Intensifying. Yet more intensity. Drops the bass. That interval is now a third. It's been a second up to now. So he's cranking it up as he goes along. Now here's for me the first place of intensity, great intensity. Those two bars. So that's bar 23, isn't it? Well, the upbeat to bar 23. And if we look at what's going on there, we've got a diminished seventh chord in the left hand. Hello Raquel, nice to meet you. And yes, Marina, we looked at. Now I have one pedal for that diminished harmony here. That for me can easily be wrapped up. I justify that because it is one harmony, because there is a crotchet quarter note at the beginning and a great big slur that goes over there. Now just look at the interval. There's your tritone, the devil in music, the augmented fourth. Now what we noticed at the beginning, the kind of dialogue that exists between the upper voice and the alto, we've got, and don't do anything too much with this, but it's reflected. I don't know if you, those of you who've played this piece, have you noticed at the end of bar 23 that the tritone is reflected in the left hand? And look at the dissonance there. Now, a new phrase, a phrase that goes forwards. I feel here, not only because of Brahms's long phrase mark, the first long phrase mark we've had actually, but just the rolling nature of these quavers, these eighth notes. The bass is stuck on an E, grounded as it were, but the melody note rises, the melody line rises. Do you feel him opening up? Move forwards. There's that, the G natural again, that pulls it down. Having felt that we were going to climb somewhere, he yanks it down from us. And in the next bar, bar 29, a lot of people don't notice this. There's a hemiola or a cross rhythm going on in the next bar. I think if Bartok had written this piece, which of course he wouldn't have, nowhere near, he would have written a bar of 6/8 in bar 29. So let me go back to bar 27. 1, 2, 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 1. Yeah, do you feel that? There's something that just at the highest point of the phrase where we feel like, maybe Clara's here, maybe I can reach her. No, it's taken from us. Now, if you notice, just at that moment, is not only in our alto but also in the tenor. Have you noticed it? Again, bringing us down, this valedictory farewell in the middle voices, just as the upper line goes up. Yeah. Now, if we look at what's coming next, I did say that this was an analysis, and I did say it was a fantasy analysis. Just have a listen to this and see if you can notice something about the opening two ideas. This and do you see what's happened? Brahms has flipped those upside down so that the soprano line, the top line, has the what was the alto line, and the bass line is, drumming that out. And for me, the marking there, Brahms has not told us to diminuendo through that. He's in fact said forte, espressivo, don't drop down. And feel the hope in this. Clara, is there some hope for us? Of course not. But do you remember that time we danced by the lake in Switzerland? What happy memories. Notice that? Now there's more to that than meets the eye. I'm talking about the dolce in bar 34, the end of bar 34. Now, you might not consciously recognize that this... Hi Frankie from Indonesia, lovely to meet you. You might not consciously notice that that's an inversion of the beginning. But some part of us would recognize something familiar, which is the nostalgia of it for me. We've heard this before somewhere, haven't we? It's very beautifully tender and lyrical, and for me it has a kind of memory of a dance. There's something dance-like about it. There's also something very conversational. If I look at what's going on in the top, Caroline, hello, and then look what's going on in the alto. They're whispering sweet nothings to each other, and they hear Clara is speaking, and Brahms says, "Yes, dear," Yeah, even more yes, dear, yeah? So when we put that together, we've got to be really aware of the dialogue. Crescendo, poco animato, let it move. If you look at the way Brahms has phrased this, I'm now looking at 39-40, the end of bar 40, phrase marks in the top, and in the left hand. One phrase, a new phrase, hello Paul, and another phrase. What we've got there is the feeling of a kind of hemiola, isn't it, that crosses the bar lines there. I don't think there is a strict term for that, but it's not 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, but I would count that's almost 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Ah, did you notice in the bass there? And here again, phrasing. Più lento, don't forget that means slower. Finally, we get to A major. Now, let's have a little look and see what's going on there. Well, we've got the opening motif, haven't we? Have we heard that, which I guess is what we would want to hear from that motif eventually, wouldn't we? If we... Eventually, I'd want to hear... for it to really resolve on the lower tonic. And it's ambiguous, isn't it, here? Because I feel that, yes, we have heard it, but have we only heard that? So I've heard both and at the same time. Hi, Liam. It's ambiguous. Had Brahms wanted to really resolve there, maybe, and I'm no composer, but maybe he would have written something like this. Left us in no doubt that things were resolved. And you may have thought, well, maybe he's going to do that at the end, you know. Fair enough, leave that hanging in the end of the A section, but what about the very end? No, it's exactly the same at the very end, leaving this question mark hanging over the resolution. Yes, it's resolved, it's done, it's done its thing. It's chord 5 to chord 1. Now, C sharp, the same note that we started on, if you remember. Now, the middle section, and this is where the magic happens. This is where the magic happens. What we've got is a middle section within a middle section. The B section within the B section, which for me is the most beautiful moment of the piece. Bar 57, that section there in the F sharp major, the major of the tonic major of the relative minor, if you want to call it that way. So F sharp minor, we don't know that yet. We only know that now. First of all, we have it here. The conversation, the dialogue. Now, I have in my imagination Clara on clarinet up here, Johannes on viola. Hello, Michael. You've got two voices there. Independent triplet cello line, which to me adds a little bit of agitation, a gentle agitation to the mood. So there's a kind of miraculous thing that Brahms does later, and I'm going to go to that spot now. Before I look at the B section within the B section, I'm going to go across to bar 64, the last beat of bar 64, and just point out, which people don't always notice, that the counterpoint that we had from bar 49, that first section, is again flipped on its end. So we have Brahms's viola is now the leader, in other words the main voice, Hauptstimme. The secondary voice up here. Thank you, Milena, thank you. So you'd really want to notice these two voices. You'd really want to notice that when you got to bar 64, that main line is now divided between the two hands. Practice it by itself. But I've jumped ahead of myself a little bit. I'm going to go back now to the end of the first part of the B section, just before the F sharp major. You notice I'm not talking about anything technical here. This is all covered in my series of well, my edition actually, it's my annotated study edition, and the resources, the video resources. It covers all the technical elements that you're going to need to know. But I think people can get too stuck on technique and miss some of these beautiful things that are happening in the music. So that's why I decided to do a video that mentions nothing, zero, about technique or anything much else. But we do need to just talk about one little pedaling thing here. So we've reached the end, and this is now bar 56. Catch the Unaccorder here. Brahms has requested it. He's asked Unaccorder, that's the left pedal, the shift pedal. Every single piano in the world has one. Don't be frightened of it. Alicia, hello. So what we get here, but by using the shift pedal, we get a muffled, muted colour. Now, okay, we know that they didn't get married. They could have, but they didn't. Who knows why? Here, in my imagination, here in my fantasy analysis, is the wedding that never happened. In Brahms's imagination, pianissimo, slower, più lento. What I like to do here is to do a kind of Hollywood, what I call my Hollywood misty lensed pedaling. So I do a slight legatissimo pedal, which means rather than change here cleanly, which gives you very sharp edges to the sound, what I do is just slightly late, now change, now change. So we get the two harmonies, or one harmony, bleeding slightly into the next, which gives you that misty lens. Now you'll notice here that there's a kind of religious feeling to this, isn't there? You can hear a church, you can hear there's a chorale going on in this heavenly key of F sharp major. But there's more to that than you might think. And I've had people bring this piece to me, advanced players who hadn't noticed that there's a canon going on here. And then here it is. Quite a tragic piece, says Mavi. Yes, it is. It's a very sad piece. So what we would want to do, just practically, I would just focus my sound on the F sharp, and then make a diminuendo as I go down toward the C sharp. And if I do that in my left hand as well, I want to voice a little bit to that F sharp. Now this F sharp. Now the tenor F sharp. Can you hear them saying, I do, I do. She says, I do, he says, I do. I will, I will. This is just in my fantasy. Right, now, let's go on. Ah, what a shame. The A natural pulls it back down to earth, doesn't it? Pulls it back to reality. I call it my party pooper note, because it says you can't stay in this fantasy, you know. Johannes is saying to himself, Brahms is saying to himself, you can't stay in this fantasy, this is not real. You have to go back home now, I'm afraid. And look what we find at that moment. No, I wouldn't bring it out like that, but just notice, it's for us to notice. There we have our farewell motif. Replay that C sharp. People don't replay that C sharp. We must replay it. Dominant seventh. And then, as I mentioned before, we've got now we have the alto, Brahms's viola, with the main line. B section, and then we get a little bridge here. Now for me a bridge is It's something that can either be crossed quickly, just functional, get from one place to the next, or it can be rather beautiful. We have a bridge near us, which is, for me, an inspiration every time I see it. In fact, there's two bridges around here that cross the Thames, the Hammersmith Bridge and the Putney Bridge. They're very, very different from each other, but they're both equally magnificent, and the sort of bridges that you might want to stand underneath and look at and admire, rather than just to, you know, get from side A to side B. So let's have a little look at this bridge and see what's going on. Brahms arrives in F sharp minor with that double appoggiatura that he's gifted us with before. So expressive, isn't it? Now we've got a kind of clarinet line here. Do you feel the dialogue is still going on? If I would take the line by itself and put it in one octave, let me take that upstairs a little bit, maybe up to here, and just play you all those appoggiaturas in the one octave, you will notice that each pair descends. But the way he lays them out reminds us that there are two people in dialogue here, in my fantasy analysis of this anyway. There's your tenor, there's your soprano, so you'd colour your sound. This would be rather richly coloured, and this might be more thinly coloured. Richer there. Clara has the last word here, sitting on this rather beautiful chord. And now Brahms slinks back into the A section, back to A major. Again, he gives us something a little different. We've not had that D natural underneath. But to all intents and purposes, this looks exactly like the A section that we'd had before. But you do remember that Brahms isn't satisfied with repeating something the same way. He likes to develop the motifs, the harmonies underneath, add stuff, give us some chromaticism there, develop a little bit the ideas, so he doesn't just recycle as is. So we're kind of thinking, well, what tricks he got up his sleeve now for the A section? Surprisingly, it all happens at the very beginning, or toward the beginning of the A section when it comes back. Now for me, the climax of the piece is in bar 82. Let's get there though. So let me go back to the upbeat to bar 77. So far so good. Now this is new. But this is the same now. That's all the same but different, and it's in the difference that the one difference that to me expresses so much. It's when Brahms finally manages to get up the octave. If you remember how he set it up at the beginning, hello Maria, yeah, the third, and then the seventh, this yearning seventh. Where are you, dear Clara? Here, what does he do? Wow, he gets there. He finds that top B. And this is all slightly different. You need to, again, really be sure. If you're playing this piece, you really need to be sure of the differences, because they do affect the performance, they do affect the meaning of the music, and they are there in the score, and they're easily missed. As I discover frequently, these are things that are easily missed. So how do we do that? How do we express that rising octave? Well, I think there are two ways of doing it. One would be to make what's known as a Russian crescendo. I'm not sure that it's a textbook term, but what it really means is, instead of making a crescendo toward a climax, you make you do the opposite. So you make an anti-climax. It's still a climax, but you do it rather like a singer. I'm not going to demonstrate how a singer would do it because I'm not a singer and I would embarrass myself. But you know how they don't go, they wouldn't belt that note. Ta! They would float up to it, which would mean a little bit of time, and certainly the colour of that top note would have to be very beautifully judged. So that's known as a Russian crescendo. Let me just see if I can do it for you. And what you want your audience to feel there is a kind of moment of gasp. And it's a little bit like, and I read this somewhere, I'm not sure where I read it, so I can't attribute it, but if you were climbing a mountain and you'd got one more footstep to go before you reached the top, and you knew that on the other side of the mountain there was going to be the most indescribably beautiful view, you probably wouldn't want to hurry that last footstep. You'd probably take it very slowly, and when you did finally see that view, your whole being would be filled with wonder at that moment. So don't if you're doing the Russian crescendo way, don't hurry over it at all. And keep your sound on the top there. There's a lot of stuff underneath that, for example. You don't want that to cover over what you've done from here, because we need to hear this line. Brahms has written it as a separate stem. Those are your top melodic notes. Now the other way of doing it, and this is perfectly feasible as well, you could make a crescendo to it. Not a big one. Brahms didn't write anything there, but you could go for it a bit more. Whoops, let me do that better. See, I don't believe in that myself. Personally, I don't believe in it myself. That's why I messed it up. Because it's not inside me to do that way, but it could be done. You could just go straight for it and you know, claim it. Now after that, everything stays the same. Let the tension build up here. Enjoy the tritone. Enjoy that dissonance, enjoy that consonance. Let the line build here. It's grounding on the bass, but climbing on the top. Now notice the farewell motif is on the top now. Subito piano. Calando tells us to take time and get softer. And then find the most beautiful colour you've ever found in your life for this. Notice the alto there. I love you. Let the sound open up. Lento, slow, don't recover from the rid. Surely one of the most beautiful pieces anybody ever dreamt up. Well, I want to thank you all for watching. I think I've come to the end of the piece. I've come to the end of my miniaturized version of the fantasy analysis. If you want to know more about my annotated study edition, do follow the links, which I believe are being added as we speak, and they will certainly be underneath when the video finishes. You will find an annotated study edition with copious footnotes, plenty of videos. I'm not sure, I lost count of how many videos I made. So there's a huge amount of resources there for you if you want to do justice to this magnificent piece of music. Thank you so much for listening and for your lovely comments, which I will look forward to reading. I may not have got to all of them as we went along, but I will have a little look now. Thank you for watching.